This podcast is brought to you by Barry's Tea. Recently, I visited the home of Barry's Tea in Cork and saw firsthand the skill and expertise of their master blender, making sure that every cup of Barry's Tea is of the highest quality. As a chef, I'm obsessed with flavour, and for me, Barry's Tea is the best tasting tea in Ireland. More than that, it also brings with it a sense of home, belonging and connection. Just one sip of Barry's Tea and you're home. So stick the kettle on, make a cup of Barry's Tea and enjoy the podcast. I slaved over the weekend making that.
Is that homemade, yeah?
Yeah.
It's vanilla and something.
Close.
Is it? It's not brown bread in there, is there?
No, you're getting closer though.
It's not sea salt.
It's not sea salt because it is white.
It's very distinctive taste, so I know it is, but I can't.
So we're now,
Okay.
because you can't see this, so Leo's now eating his ice cream, which we'll get to, and we're trying to work out the... I thought ice cream and holidays. So that gives...
Coconut.
Coconut,
Yeah,
nailed
coconut.
it.
Yeah, okay.
That's a pressure
Coconut,
moment.
yeah. That should be more obvious now.
So, sitting in front of me, Leo Varadkar, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm delighted you're here. Hopefully it's going to be something a little different, a little interesting.
My pleasure. That's definitely different for me.
Definitely started with ice cream. I don't know if you've ever done an interview that started with ice cream.
No.
So we've nailed it first. So part of the, I suppose I should do the intro. Part of the thing with this podcast is I always ask one ingredient, one dish that you're into. I was surprised you picked ice cream. So I was doing my research and you go through and you go, okay, you're qualified GP, you were first elected county councillor in 2004. And I also saw highest number of votes of any candidate in the country for that election. You're TD for Dublin West, you're a former Taoiseach and you're leader Fine Gael from 2017 to 2024. So really high-end, high-achieving things, and your kind of go-to ingredient is ice cream.
Yeah, it's the king of food, isn't it?
You-
It's perfect for almost any occasion. So, if you have had maybe too much drink the night before, it's a great way to settle the stomach. Great way to finish off a meal. Have been known to have it as a starter.
Okay.
As well as a dessert, and of course there's so many different flavors, and even around the world, you know, if you go into different places and you try out their ice cream, it's always different. Or there's a new flavor you haven't tried. So,
Well, I just assumed as leader of the country, it would be, I don't know, caviar or gold leaf this or the finest of ingredients. Ice cream's pretty simple.
yeah, look, I like those things too, but sometimes the simple things are the best. It's also a great snack you can have on the go.
Mm-hmm.
You can have it in a tub, you can have it in a cone on a stick.
And you say after a night out, so would that be something let's say now, is it something you do? Do you go out? Do you go drinking? What's the sort of night out looking like for Leo?
Yeah, look, it depends on depends on the night and where I am in the world.
Yeah.
Have a little bit more time now than I had in the past for socialise with friends rather than kind of official events and so on. So was out there on Saturday night. Was a double birthday. One friend turned 47, another friend turned 29. So started off in a nice restaurant. I have to confess was Bastable, which isn't too far from our house.
Okay.
And is one of the nice restaurants in Dublin at the moment, I think. So that was the fancy part of the evening. And then we went to a house party in Harold's Cross and ended up in Lost Lane for the night. That was fun.
That sounds like a kind of college night out for me back in the day.
Did I have ice cream the next day? I think I didn't. I went to Marlowe's, which is near where I lived.
So when you're out and about, like on whatever Bastable, or you're going out after, like people obviously know you're Leo Varadkar based on a role that's very public facing. So how does that roll on a night out?
It kind of depends on where you go. I like it's generally okay. Like the vast majority of people, particularly in Ireland, kind of respect your privacy, and the odd person wants to say hello or maybe get a photograph or whatever, which easier to say yes than no generally. So would generally agree to that
As a politician,
that's just like the restroom or something. I just think that's weird. Somebody asking you for a photograph,
Yeah.
The urinal in the background or whatever. But as long as it's not a toilet or a restroom, that's fine. The odd person might want to give you a bit of guff, particularly if they've been on the sauce or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have people around you that know the score and can deal with it, or is it very much you're left there going, all right?
Well, like I don't have a security detail anymore,
Okay.
which obviously is fine because I no longer hold high office. But still a certain amount of guard protection. I'm not supposed to go into the details about that for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But most of my friends kind of know the score, so they're been friends for a long time. Like it's not their job to protect me or anything, but they kind of know how to disengage people.
Yeah. I'd say they're used to it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And tell me then, one of the questions I love with sort of this podcast is, obviously you've moved out, you're not the Taoiseach anymore, you're still TD for Dublin West and you're not contesting the next election, but in terms of nowadays, so like this morning, you open your fridge, what's in Leo Varadkar's fridge?
Okay, well today the fridge is very full.
Okay.
Because we do the old fashioned weekly shop, but Matt does it, I don't do it. I'll nip in.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you do your own shopping?
No, well, I might nip into the Spar for something, or there's a corner shop at the end of our street. But the actual kind of main shop now, and it just makes more sense for Matt to do it because if I do it, it would take about 2 hours. Just kind of people talking to me and so on. Wouldn't be efficient.
Okay.
And I know some politicians who make a point of doing it, and they treat it almost like a canvas, and they get seen in the local supermarket or whatever. But no, I usually avoid it. So yeah, the fridge very full today, but as the week goes by, it'll be whittled down.
And what will you have in it? What are your go-tos?
Yeah, so try to be pretty clean during the week if I can. Not so much of the weekend. So a lot of ingredients basically. So there's some chicken breast in there, a bit of steak, some meatballs. I like to make things with eggs, so like omelets, scrambled eggs. So there's always plenty of eggs. The kind of protein yogurts, the Faye.
Oh yeah, okay,
that's in there too. To make sure I'm getting my my protein. And what else is there? Kind of vegetables, butter.
Do you cook?
Yeah, I do. When I was Taoiseach as a minister, I might have cooked once a week.
Okay.
It'd be simple stuff.
Yep.
Stir fry, that type of thing. Nothing amazing. But I have discovered the air fryer.
Yeah.
In the past few weeks.
Okay, how's that working?
I'm not sure what you'd think of that as a chef, but
I love it.
I'm having fun.
Anything that makes, we're using it at home. Anything that makes it easier.
Yeah, I think so.
And gets people cooking.
So I'm kind of having fun trying that out.
So when you talk to me about when you're a minister then, so you're cooking at home once a week, like are you out, you have to be out for dinner every night apart from that?
You'd be out at something nearly every week.
Yeah.
The Dáil sits late on a Wednesday, so you might be there for votes, maybe on Tuesday too. Then one night you might be in studio, RT or Virgin or whatever. Another night you might be kind of a residents meeting. Another night it might be a Fine Gael meeting. So you would definitely, I used to always try and block off one weeknight a week to make sure that I had at least one weeknight a week.
At home.
And that was kind of like, at home, like half time to spend to catch up on paperwork, but it was kind of in theory date night or whatever.
Yeah,
so we'd try to get to the cinema or, just cook or, even order in.
Yeah.
Weekends wouldn't be as bad. You'd have a bit more flexibility around that. And then there's obviously a lot of foreign travel. You would have been traveling around the country or abroad pretty much every week. And, I think anyone who travels at work will know those weeks that you travel, you can't spend the next week catching up.
Yeah.
But
there's no routine.
I was kind of traveling every week. Yeah. And that actually kind of wears you out after a while.
So you say, take for example, I know I wanted to ask about sort of nowadays, but we're in it now as being Taoiseach. Like what sort of time, you obviously you live at home. What sort of time are you getting up at? Do you have breakfast every day? Is there some sort of structure to the days?
Yeah, there isn't exactly a set structure. And that was one of the fun things about the job actually, is, every day was different. Every week was different. There are always new challenges. When the Dáil's in session, it's obviously a lot busier than when it isn't. But when it isn't, that's the time you use to do a lot of the foreign travel or to get around the country. And always made the point of trying to get to every county in the country at least once a year, because it's important, particularly when you're a Dublin politician, to be seen out and about around the country. But like roughly speaking, like if I didn't have an early meeting or if I wasn't doing like a breakfast event or something, I used to try and get to the gym first thing, because that's kind of fitness is kind of important. It's important to me. And it's time out as well, because you can't be thinking about the job. And
where is there a Dáil gym or
there is a Dáil gym, but I would hardly ever go there because you'd end up having to have conversations
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of actually doing your workout.
I'd love to see a Dáil gym. I didn't know that.
No, something special, and it's for the staff as well, not just the members.
Okay, yeah.
Because like, bear in mind, there's over 1,000 people working in the precinct.
Okay, I
It's
didn't know
not
that,
just the TDs and senators. But it's more like a hotel gym, so it's kind of small weights and cardio stuff.
So where did you go?
Remember a gym called Perpetua. It's kind of
Okay.
down by the Docklands, sort of a CrossFit gym. So
My wife's brought me, and it's
Yes.
treacherous.
try and get there. Try and get there in the morning, and so usually wouldn't have breakfast. Might have like a protein shake or something like that. But would have lunch and dinner obviously.
Okay, and is that all? That's all in the Dáil?
No. So well, like I suppose it would depend on what you're doing, but like government buildings is sort of separate from the Dáil, even though they're connected by a bridge. But like the Dáil restaurants and self-service are really busy. And
Is it good? Is it good?
It is actually good, but if you're trying to get in and out there for a quick lunch, like that would not happen. You just wouldn't be able to.
What would they be serving now on a lunch day?
Well, there's a self-service, and then there's like the proper restaurant.
Okay, yeah.
So the proper restaurant has a menu, but you'd probably only go in there if you were taking guests in,
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe on Wednesday night if you're waiting around for a vote.
Yeah.
It's a good chance to have dinner with your colleagues.
Yeah, I got you.
And that's our chance to chat and exchange stories. And then the self-service is the self-service basically. So we do everything.
What time in the night are you getting home at from a standard day as a Taoiseach?
Then probably 10.
Yeah,
about 10.
And are you straight to bed or working, or does
No. So would always record the RT 9 o'clock news and the BBC 10 o'clock news. So we'll try and catch them, and then go through the kind of speeches and paperwork and briefings for the next day. So probably to bed about 1.
And back up at
whatever 6:45.
That's worse than a chef, and
It's
far more important.
Yeah, it's like it's a great gig, and it's it's exciting, and you get to do such amazing things and go places, meet people, achieve important things along the way. But was definitely never going to be a thing for life for me.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of glad I.
Did you always know that?
Oh yeah, I did. Now I actually stopped saying it because I think I famously said in an interview a long time ago that I'd be out of politics by the time I was 50, which was always my intention. And I intend to be out of it by the time I'm 50 now. Probably at 46 before it happens.
So you're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, ahead of schedule, but like my press officer reprimanded me, said that will be interpreted as a lack of commitment, and that you don't have the staying power or
that's what your mother would say to you in school.
So I had to stop saying it.
Okay,
but it was always what I had in mind.
And how? I suppose that's a nice segue into how did you get into politics?
Very early on. So, like it was the kind of thing I was interested in as a kid. And, when I saw posters going up, I would be interested in what was going on. Used to love going down to vote with my mum.
What age is this sort of?
Like 7, 8.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, probably should have been interested in football or something, but I wasn't.
It turned out all right.
Yeah. and then I sort of was involved in sort of student politics in college. But I think the main thing behind it really was, if I didn't like the way things were happening in my community, grew up in Badgetown, West Dublin. At that time, a lot of new housing, but not a lot of infrastructure. And then even working in the health service, if I didn't like the way things were run, I could never be the kind of person who just kind of complains or says they should do something or take to Twitter or whatever, I just had to kind of try and see what I could change for the better. Yeah. And in some cases I've been able to do that. And in other cases I haven't, but I'm kind of happy I tried because even when you're not successful at solving a problem, just understanding it better and understanding why it is the way it is, I think is kind of helpful in its own right.
And the commitment to do something about it.
Yeah.
On your childhood, before obviously going into the politics, talk to me about your childhood. Like, one of the questions I always like to ask is, going to school, what sort of food would be in your lunchbox? Like, how central was food to your family life growing up?
I guess my school lunchbox could have been a lot better because, like, one of the things we did when I was in government, and it's really happening now on a wider scale, is to extend the school meals program.
Yeah,
making sure that all kids have a hot school meal, which it's really good because I think kids that are hungry aren't going to be able to concentrate. But for me, that would have been very basic. Like, it might have been hope I'm not going to offend my mother now, but it would have been maybe just
most guests there have.
Yeah, maybe just some sandwich
and fathers.
Maybe just sandwiches. I don't particularly like sandwiches, so it was just kind of sandwiches and like probably a bag of crisps or something. So it wouldn't have been great in that sense.
And who was cooking at home then after school?
That would have been my mum, and she. You probably know my dad's Indian, my mum's Irish.
Yeah.
So part of their compromise getting married is in those days, if it was an interreligious marriage, you had to commit to raising the children as Catholic. So
okay.
The special dispensation from the Pope to get married and all that stuff. So my dad agreed to raise us as Catholics.
That was
handy.
How
we were, but my mum had to learn how to cook Indian food. So she went off and did the Madhur Jaffrey Indian
nice.
course.
Where was your mum from?
Waterford. Yeah, West Waterford. So
there wasn't much Indian food in Waterford.
No, far from tandoori she was raised, but yeah, so she would be much more meat and 2 veg. But yeah, so grew up on a farm. So she actually learned to be an Indian cook, and she is a very good Indian cook, in fairness.
And would you have sat down as a family in your childhood, and it was sort of dinner time was a time to chat?
Yeah. No, it was late enough because my dad was the local GP.
Okay.
And surgery wouldn't finish until quite late, and so we mightn't have eaten until 7:30 or 8, which probably had me snacking from the time I returned from school to dinner time. So that wasn't a good thing, not a good habit. Largely banned snacks from the house now, which really helps. Because once I start on something, I'll finish it. So try not to open. That's because you have me talking. But try not to open the bag or box of anything, because once it's open, I'm going to finish it off. So yeah, we would have dinner as a family at night time, and then probably the same then at weekends. I think that's an important thing. I don't know to what I'm sure families still do that, and that's still the norm. But the amount of people you see on their phones at dinner or on iPads and things. So I think it's
in
good.
all parts of life.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I do too. But I think it's good to have a bit of time where people are not connected to the internet or watching the TV or whatever. And I think meal times kind of are that time. Or can be that time.
Should be. Would you say then, obviously, it sounds like you came from a very, I suppose, normal upbringing in a normal family, but would getting into politics then as you got older, would they have been very supportive of that?
Yes and no. I think they were worried that, it wouldn't work out, or that I'd be disappointed, or I wouldn't succeed. For a long time, politics, generally, for most people, you're a volunteer before you're, in a remunerated position. So, you're putting in a lot of hours, a lot of time.
This is on top of being a GP.
Volunteer. Yeah, well, yeah, and yeah.
Just a little
training
side note.
GP. Yeah, so, and like one thing, particularly my mum was very determined that I should do, was make sure I finished college, because I think she's afraid I'd like politics too much, that I would leave college and not finish my course.
Yep.
As it happens, the current Taoiseach left college and didn't finish his course, but he's still Taoiseach, so
he's doing all right.
So you don't actually have to finish college, but it probably is a good idea.
And was always the plan to be the Taoiseach?
Not necessarily, but I was always going to give politics a go.
Yeah.
And then if it worked out, obviously, if you're an ambitious person, you want to get to the top. I know not everyone necessarily does, but.
And is there because I would say, I've never met you in person till today, but obviously as the Taoiseach of Ireland, you feel like you know someone because you've been watching you for however many years on TV, and obviously everything you do has an effect on everyone's life. And I can imagine that's quite a hard position for you to be in then when you go meet people on the street. And I would have always said, look, Leo comes across as a straight talking but quite a balanced individual in the way he communicates. But on the flip side, I'm also saying you don't get to be the leader of Fine Gael or the Taoiseach or work your way through all the ranks without being very shrewd behind the scenes to get there. So, is there a plan that you map out as this 12-year-old kid, say, or even a little bit later when you get first elected in 2004, of how you're going to go about this career?
I wouldn't not a kind of a life plan with timelines or anything like that. And politics, and this is probably true of other professions, but I think it's particularly true of politics. Is a lot of it is right time, right place. So you can put in the work, but if the wind is against your party or your party is unpopular, hard-working TDs lose their seats, you know. And to a certain extent, you make your own luck, but I was kind of fortunate the way timings worked out. The 2002 election was a really bad one for my party. This is when Bertie Ahern was at his strongest and, you know, got re-elected. We had a really bad election, but that actually created a lot of opportunities for other people, for people, you know, younger people like me to become candidates. So
what age were you around then?
So it was the 2007 election then when I got elected to the Dáil. So I was about 28.
Is that young? That sounds young to me.
That was young, yeah. There have been a lot younger. Ivan Yates was 21, I think, when he became a TD. John Bruton, 23, but it was fairly young. I wasn't the youngest in that Dáil, but I think it was the second or third youngest.
Because even I think of myself at 28, thinking, well, it's particularly 21 with Ivan Yates. You think you know it all at that age, and then as you get a bit older,
this is the thing. Yeah, you see, I thought I knew everything, and as life has gone on, I've realised that I know less than I thought I did.
I'd say this job will do it to you.
That's a good thing.
And how does it? So you become Taoiseach then in 2017, and without wanting to put you in a position where you sound like this leader that gets to the top of the mountain and it's all conquering, how does it feel to be elected as Taoiseach and then go off to the Áras and get, surely from a leave the ideals behind and policy and all that, just as a human being who puts their mind to a career and gets to the top job, how does that feel on that day?
Yeah, like it's actually bittersweet in a way because like it's a great day and it's a great privilege, and you know, your friends and supporters are there and they're extremely proud of you and what you've achieved. One of the things though you're very much thinking about on that day is appointing your cabinet, and that's really tough because there are always more people you pass over than you can appoint or promote.
Close colleagues, I imagine.
Yeah, close colleagues, and it's personal and it's difficult. And you're hurting a lot of feelings. You're bruising egos as well. And you're also, in some cases, potentially turning friends into future enemies.
Yes.
So that's the tough part of politics.
And how does that work? Do you go meet people? Do you pick up the phone? Do you?
We can do both. But generally what I would have tried to do on most occasions was to meet people one-to-one, because even if you were telling them that they weren't being reappointed, you should have the courage, I think, to do that in person.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's fascinating.
That was hard.
That's all in the first day or first 2 days.
Yeah, well, each time you become Taoiseach, yeah. So I did that sort of 3 times. The 2 times I became Taoiseach, and then the 1 time when I became Taoiseach, and we formed the coalition.
I presume that isn't a one man or one woman job. There's a team around you of. So we always hear about advisors, and look, I'm getting to an age now where politics is really starting to come into like early 30s. It really starts to affect you every day. In a way, when you're in your 20s, you're just kind of working away and whatever. And I'm fascinated by the team around the Taoiseach, and how do you go about making decisions and making policy and making cabinet decisions? Who are these people? Yeah,
like you've a big team.
Yeah.
You know, so you have you know, your chief staff, you have your press people, your policy people. They're all political appointees, appointed by you, and then there's the civil service team, who are civil servants essentially, and they stay in place no matter who is in government or who is who's Taoiseach. But that's something you're thinking about as well, because, you know, for example, if you don't reappoint a minister, the contracts of their advisors are terminated.
So how many people are on the decision?
Well, I suppose for a minister, they could have 2 advisors, maybe a constituency person, previously civilian drivers, although it's now Garda drivers.
Yeah.
And these would also be people you might know.
You'd be in the Dáil gym with them the morning.
Yeah, well, there was not a good reason to avoid the Dáil gym. So, yeah, so, you know, it can be, like it is, that personal aspect of it can be quite difficult.
That doesn't really get talked about in the wider sphere.
No, it doesn't. And also people don't want to be seen to be complaining. But we often hear, and, you know, it's a great opportunity to serve, and, you know, most people after reflection are grateful for the time that they got, particularly if they got to sit a cabinet at all or to be minister at all. But on the particular day, of course, it can be very difficult. But I do often hear people saying, oh, there's this permanent government that's there and nothing ever really changes. Like that's only kind of half true, because you actually have a lot of people who whose contracts are tied to yours. So when I decided to step down as Taoiseach, the contracts of maybe 10, 15 people that day were terminated, which you're obviously always thinking about too.
Yeah, fascinating. One thing I did really want to ask you, and obviously it's a hot topic at the moment with across the water in the US elections, it's still a very Irish thing that when you're talking about terms of government and Taoiseach, and part of the job is the White House visit. And it's still is it the sexiest part of the job from an outside looking in? Probably. How does that work? How many visits do you have?
5.
5. So talk about the first time. Do you like everything from, because we see the Shamrock ceremony on 6/1 and we go, there's Leo handing over the Shamrocks. Great. Isn't it great? Green ties, all that. What are the logistics around that?
Yeah, like it's a huge event and program. So, it gets worked out for weeks in advance. And there are some kind of core things that happen every time. The Ireland Funds dinner, the meeting with the Vice President in their house in the Naval Observatory, the meeting with the President in the Oval Office, going to Congress for the Speaker's lunch, meeting the Irish American Congress people and so on. So a number of things that are fixed. And then you try to add in some other things that might be relevant to the time. Or you might take the opportunity to add in a second city, like Boston or New York, and go to one of the parades there, because there's no parade actually in DC, or not a big one that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So I did Chicago, did New York on different visits. Then there's like any number of people who want certain things to be included in the gift basket to the president, particularly from the food and drink sector. Understandably want to promote their products and so on.
I assume they just take a photo of it and that's it.
Yes, that the way gifts work. There's one form of gift which is given by the principal to the principal. Okay, that's quite rare. So that might be only one thing.
Principal being you to the president.
Yeah. So and you're probably trying to make a statement with that one thing, and then there's all these other gifts that they call protocol, and they're given protocol to protocol, and you either never see them or they turn up in your office about 3 months later.
And what happens to them?
Depends on what they are. I used to redistribute them generally, because there's only so many glass bowls with Speaker of the House that you actually need. Yeah. So I kind of give them to other people who
they're not sitting around your house now forevermore.
No, the odd one is, but I generally kind of give them to people who kind of worked on the trip or worked on the visit, and would probably appreciate it more than I would.
So you jump on the plane.
Yeah. So the government jet does not cross the Atlantic. The new one might. The old one did, but never in my time as Taoiseach did we have a plane that crossed the Atlantic, unfortunately. Which is a bad thing, by the way, because it's not just about transporting ministers around the place. We don't have the capacity to fly our own soldiers to and from Lebanon, or rescue citizens from Sudan or wherever. So hopefully,
kind of like a parent not having a car.
A bit,
it's just a thing you need.
Yeah. Well, that's controversial at the moment, so you don't have to have a car, as you know, to live in Ireland. But certainly do if you live in a rural area. But
we don't have Ivan Yates here, Tom. Anyway, don't worry.
So that, yes. So it's just regular commercial, and but then the minute you arrive in the US, because of their security apparatus, you're really then under the kind of watchful eye and control of the Secret Service.
What does that look like? You get it, the plane lands.
Yeah. So whisked off somewhere, big suburban truck kind of thing you're going around in, and then security. You're not allowed to open the door of the car. They have to open it for you, all that type of stuff. Now that's great in a way, because it means you get around. I've been to the States since I stepped down, and I now remember how hard it is to get around places like New York and Washington. They used to seem easy, but
you have to get a taxi now.
Well, I actually gave up. I was in New York. I was using Ubers, and it took so bloody long. I changed over to the subway, which is faster. So.
Go back anyway. So who's with you in the car when you land? Do you have the detail? You have your own?
Probably at that point the ambassador.
Okay,
because the ambassador's going to want to talk to you and sort of fill you in on everything that's happening and things in the program and stuff that they didn't want to put in writing.
Okay,
because anything in writing is subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which means less gets written down than would have been the case in the past. So a good thing for transparency, a bad thing for historians.
Okay.
And then then you kind of head off and you do your program. It's busy, it's intense.
So
pretty
I
hectic.
assume every minute of the day is filled with, and you are just switched on.
Yeah, it can be. Like more and more as the years went on, I used to kind of insist on having a block of free time each day.
Yeah.
Just to check your emails, return phone calls, clear your head.
Yeah.
But there's for every one thing you agree to do, there's 10 you don't. So,
Yeah.
Your people are always trying to add more things in, which is understandable. But you're trying to say, look, need a bit of time for headspace here to even just to an important phone call back home that you don't return for 72 hours could become a crisis.
Yeah.
Whereas if you actually do that on the day, you can kind of calm nerves and so on. So I got better at sort of insisting on that being allowed for.
Where do you stay?
Usually in a hotel.
Yeah.
Would always try to make sure, ideally, that it's an Irish-owned hotel. So the kind of go-to one for politicians would be Fitzpatrick's in New York, or the DuPont Hotel in DC. But there's a place called the Blair House, and that's the official guest house for anyone who's going to see the president. Bit like Farmley for us. And
Is it as nice as Farmley?
it's lovely. Actually, Farmley's a bigger, more beautiful building, but the Blair House is pretty amazing. It's actually right across from the White House, so it's really handy in that sense. Yeah. It's also when a president gets elected, there's a gap.
Yeah.
They elect their president in November, but the president doesn't take up office until January. So it's the house that the president-elect can use, for their transition period as they're getting ready to take the reins of office.
I assume you get fed in Blair House. Yeah,
well, it is really great, I have to say, and the level of hospitality is just on a different level.
Yeah,
different to what you'd have in a hotel. So you can stay there, and your whole delegation can stay there as well.
Okay.
And then you've a bit of privacy. You're not running into random people in the reception and so on. And they do really good food. And what I actually felt bad sometimes though is they would always have food ready just in case. And I say I don't know. I'm sure they have some policy to make sure it doesn't get wasted. But like a lot of the time, you it's just too late to eat, or you weren't hungry or whatever. But it was still always there and always ready. And even if you kind of dropped like your shirt on the ground, it would come back 2 or 3 hours later, washed and pressed, and you name it. So
class.
It was definitely one of the perks of the job.
And then you meet the president on Patrick's Day. Now, I'm not expecting you to give me
it's
behind the scenes.
Not always Patrick's Day.
Okay,
yeah. President Biden, being very Irish and very much an Irish American, pretty much I think always tried to have it on St. Patrick's Day, but that wouldn't necessarily have been the case for President Trump or President Obama. They would do it. They would do the event, of course, but it mightn't always actually be on the day.
And what happens at that event?
Well, there's the meeting in the Oval Office, and that's the kind of more serious part.
And is it a serious meeting? I've always wondered, is it a photo call or is it a serious meeting?
Oh, no, it is. So, it starts off with the little kind of press briefing, and that's the bit you kind of see on TV, where you kind of speak to each other in front of the cameras, and that's kind of the messaging you want to put across, to the world or to people back home.
And a lot of work goes into that, I assume. That's very...
Yeah, that's what you're going to say. President Trump being unpredictable, you never knew what he was going to say, but it was certainly a little bit more... to plan with President Biden.
Are you nervous going into something like that?
It was the first time, yeah.
Because you're kind of representing Irish interests.
Yeah,
so.
I was very much the first time. And one thing they have in America that you don't see here are these little microphones that go around on the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but for the first time ever, there's this sort of moving microphone at my feet. And, so things like that you just don't necessarily know what to expect. And then you kind of get into the serious meeting. And because it's only 35, 40 minutes, you really have to zone in. On 2 or 3 topics that you want to talk about. Now the temptation is there, to kind of rattle through 10 or 20 things so you can say back home that you raised all these different things. But that's how you tick boxes. It's not how you get outcomes. So you need to kind of pick maybe 2 or 3 things that are particularly important.
Does it ever go wrong? Not that it, but I assume there's lots of different characters in these different rooms. It can't always be rosy.
Yeah, it's unlikely to go horribly wrong. Certainly with President Biden, it was a smaller meeting, a smaller number of people. President Trump would have had maybe 20 officials and cabinet secretaries and you name it in the room. So he'd be more likely to refer to them to answer a question or to ask a question than President Biden. So everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
You pick the kind of issues. Certainly in the early years, there was a lot around Brexit and the Good Friday Agreement and so on. The most recent one, the last one, in a strange way, was one where we talked least about Ireland because, was very keen to talk about Palestine and get across the president, particularly how Irish people felt about what was going on there.
And is there an open dialogue, or do you get a sense you're actually talking one-on-one with someone, or is it just, I don't know, from the outside looking in, it can often seem like it's just a bit of a show? Or is there that where you're sitting in a room like we are here going, oh, well, actually I have an opinion on this and I'd like to...
Well, like there is an element of show to it, but there's also an element that is that's quite serious. Sometimes it's a tete-a-tete and it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
So certainly with...
I assume that's when...
Yeah, that's, so it's certainly President Biden, we had tete-a-tetes. I don't think I did with President Trump. Maybe I did. I can't remember exactly for sure. And often the tete-a-tete is the one where you can have the most serious conversation.
Okay,
because
right. Leo, right, President, what's the story here?
Or if I said this, what would you say back? That's that sort of thing.
Do you eat? Is there a dinner? In the White House?
No, there isn't. No. There isn't a dinner in the White House. Again, it can be different each time.
Do you get lunch in the White House? Do you get any?
This year there was a lunch.
Okay.
President Biden kind of hosted a lunch for sort of Irish American leaders, and not sure what the correct term is. But So you sort of but they were his invitees. But went along to that.
Is the food good?
It is good, but you know this better than most from your line of work. Any food done for 200 or 300 people, it's only ever going to be so good because they have to produce it kind of en masse. And
you, as Taoiseach, you get to eat, because I know there's certain people and things I've done where very high-ranking people can't actually eat the food.
Yeah, that's right. So there's no rule on us not eating at events. So there's yet to be an Irish politician poisoned. As you can imagine, having lost 3 presidents in the US to assassins, and history of kings and queens being poisoned in the past, it's a little bit different for other countries. So there's nothing on us eating, but you'll see sometimes maybe a member of the royal family or a head of state or government not eating, and I actually felt very sorry for them, because
it's not awkward at the table.
The food gets plated, gets taken away. The next course comes on, it gets taken away, and
so they actually get served it.
Yeah,
and they just look at it.
Yes, yeah, and I'd have found that impossible. I would have to learn how to get used to it, or maybe I've seen they have dinner before they go to the dinner or whatever. But I always kind of felt sorry for them that the food would arrive and then just be taken away again.
So they're obviously they're eating in a controlled environment with separately to everyone else. Yeah.
Now, I think they can eat the food, but it requires then that there be somebody in the kitchen watching it being prepared. And I say that's kind of complicated too.
No one ever thinks of this when they look at the 6-1 news and they see the shamrock.
And I can almost that's where when you're a politician or a head of government in a small country, you do have a level of freedom that others don't have, and you can live a relatively normal life. So like I remember Boris Johnson saying to me that they couldn't get Deliveroo into Down Street, because he wanted to whatever order his favourite takeaway, and seemingly that was a palaver, or couldn't be done, or was very hard to be done. And I remember Vice President Harris saying to me that going to restaurants was almost impossible, because they'd have to either shut down the restaurant or shut down the block, and the amount of inconvenience it would cause for other people just to be able to go to a restaurant.
You'd feel so selfish almost.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, whereas like thankfully when you're Taoiseach, or I think probably head of government in any small country, you can do relatively normal things that could be very, very difficult for leaders of big countries, where they can only eat the food that gets prepared in their official residence. And
will it remain like that in Ireland, that we have that, so you have that level of freedom to go to Bastable for a dinner or go off for a couple of drinks while you're...
Well, for me, because I'm done now. But for future generations, I don't know, and I hope it does. But we have to be mindful of the fact that it wasn't always that safe. If you go back to the foundations of state, politicians were assassinated. Michael Collins through to Kevin Higgins. So, and even during the Troubles, people had armed guards outside their houses and were given guns and so on. So, thankfully, it's still a very safe country in that sense.
And I wanted to ask you, I'll come back to it about the speech you made during COVID, but on what you just said there, why would someone now get into politics? Like, from a really selfish point of view on my side, I'm like, it just seems like a really tough business where every sentence you read out is scrutinized. Everywhere you go, you're scrutinized. Like, what's the incentive to get into politics now? Because obviously it's the foundation of democracy, and it's really, really important, particularly with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, to have up and coming politicians.
Yeah, well, look, it is a tough gig, and it's probably not a job for somebody who is sensitive or, whose feelings could be hurt very easily. You do need to have a degree of resilience and certainly be able to build that up. But it is enormously rewarding. Even the small things, like when I was starting off as a county councillor in my community, you might be doing very simple things like getting footpaths fixed or getting a new playground installed in a park, or
things you can see.
Yeah, and that's actually, like, in some ways, local politics can be the most rewarding in that sense, because you can really see those things. The school extension, whatever it is, and then if you have the opportunity to be a minister, to do things in your brief, that otherwise wouldn't have been done, because some things would have happened anyway, and then there's other things that maybe wouldn't have been done, except for the fact that you decided that this was going to be a priority, and that's enormously rewarding.
You have to care. It strikes me something you actually have to care.
Yeah. Well, unless you're a totally cynical person and you don't care and you just love and there probably are people out there, sadly, get to positions in high office and don't care. And
not to name names.
No, and they probably love the prestige, and they're the ones who want to go on forever. But
on that prestige, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, are you aware that you have the most watched TV event in Irish history?
I think I am. That's the St. Patrick's Day speech.
The speech in Blair House.
I didn't know it was the most watched one, but
yeah, according to my research,
I knew it was up there, or at least that year it was anyway.
Because I always, when we have people in this podcast, I go, kind of a thing in Ireland or Irish life is, you're notable depending on how many times you'll appear in Reeling in the Years.
Yes,
in the next decade.
I'm on that now, which is it's actually kind of scary, because they've done that. Which decade have they done? They've done I think they've done 2010. You're going to be in both. Yes,
you're in the past season. You're going to be back in 10 years.
Yeah, it's kind of scary seeing yourself on Reading the Years, though. But
that's when you've done something. You positive or negative, you've done something. Talk to me about that moment, because do you have a sense when you're walking down those steps? Because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Because I watch it and I go, this kind of seems pretty big, particularly when you're looking at the lectern on RT News and they're holding on it before you even arrive, and you go, okay, well, this must be big. Do you get a sense of that at moments like that in that role?
In terms of how it's going to be received by...
No, just in terms of history. Are you going, this is going to be unreal in the years?
No, I definitely knew that was a big moment.
Okay.
Bear in mind that the virus had hit Spain at that stage and Italy, so...
You probably know more than we do as public, because we kind of go, I remember going, sure, we'll probably be back to work in 2 weeks. And then I saw this and I was like, oh.
Well, we did have a sense of what was to come, and it was just a question of timing as to when we made the decisions that need to be made and closed schools and subsequently closed everything. I definitely didn't think it would go on for the best part of 2 years at that point,
What do you think when you're writing that speech? Don't mind the policy, just from a personal point of view as the Taoiseach.
Yes, I wrote that night, like, lying in the bed in the Blair House, because we'd to leave this dinner early because events were unfolding. I think President Trump had just announced that flights to Europe had been cancelled, and NEFID, I haven't said that word in a long time, but NEFID we're
gives me the shivers.
We're giving us advice around schools and so on. So kind of wrote the first draft myself. I for the big speeches, I used to always try to write the first draft myself. Wasn't possible to do for everything, and then my people kind of worked on it over the night and put it into shape. So I knew it was going to be a big moment, and then it was kind of a case of how quickly can we get home, because I was keen to just discharge whatever remaining duties there were in Washington, and
It was kind of get out
get
of
back to
Dodge.
Dublin. Yeah.
Yeah, you never think. I know, as we see that moment, that 2 or 3 minutes, and it's even describing leaving the dinner and a certain amount of chaos. There must have been a certain amount of, oh God, here we go.
There's only twice in my life I've been brought through the kitchens. In America, it happens a lot because they often don't use the main entrance, but that was one of those rare occasions where it literally was, we have to leave now, and you leave through the kitchens. And
Another Washington trip wrapped up. At least the beds were nice in Blair House as you wrote the speech.
There were, yeah, it's a lovely spot, and unfortunately you can't stay there unless you become head of government.
Couple of quick fires before you go. What you for dinner last night?
I just skipped dinner last night. Oh no, I didn't. No, I was at like a kind of an Indian celebration event, so Indian vegetarian food of some sort.
Nice. Your signature dish?
I love seafood, and I love garlic, so gambas al ajo.
Perfect. Match made in heaven. I remember, was it during COVID? Battenberg cake was a thing with you?
Yeah, no, that's more Matt. So
okay.
Yeah, Matt's a big fan of Battenberg.
We surprised
insists that it be apricot and apricot jelly and not raspberry or strawberry or whatever. So
there was about 3 days of news off a photo of Battenberg cake.
It's amazing what makes the news and what doesn't. It really is. I'll never figure that out, but it did. But I think.
Do you ever think now of just throwing something up there for the crack just to watch it, see how it goes?
Not really. No.
Soon.
I'm not looking for attention anymore. So that was So he likes Battenberg. So I just thought it was his birthday, and I was on the way home, and just stopped in this bar or wherever, and
again it's
picked
a
up
thing.
Battenberg. Apparently, Battenberg sales went up for a few weeks after that.
You should have taken out shares in Mr. Kipling before that. But that's another great Irish thing, isn't it? You talk about being able to go about your business and how something like a photo of Battenberg cake can take off around here. It's into the Irish humour almost.
Yeah, and it was kind of fun. And then for for about years afterwards, everywhere I went, there was Battenberg's.
And you're there, haha, yeah, great, yeah.
But the one that went the wrong way now was meal prep, because I don't really do meal prep, but Matt does it.
What was that now?
I took a photograph of Matt having done the meal prep.
Okay.
But the lids weren't on little boxes. They're all in little plastic boxes. And I took the photograph before he'd put the lids on. And then this became a bit of a mini scandal, because it got to the point after 7 hours where the Food Safety Authority issued a tweet or a statement reminding people to cover their lunchbox. So,
and what did you think when you saw that?
You just never know. You never know. But it's part of the fun thing about politics. You never know any day when you wake up what's going to happen that day or how it's going to end.
I had to take my, not this is about me, I had to take my email off my address because as things would go out on TV or in books or in print, I didn't enjoy people having direct access to my inbox with their thoughts on specific things, including that Kling film, apparently, according to someone, was going to lower my sperm count, and I got a 2-page essay on that.
Okay, that's a new one.
Part of the, not Taoiseach, but chef life. Worst meal of your life?
That was probably one that I did myself. I was only a teenager. I think I was like 14 or something at the time, and I decided I'd cook my own pizza.
Okay.
And it was one of those kind of Goodfellas ones, or Domino's, or whatever. No, Goodfellas, I think it was. But I didn't know you're supposed to take the plastic off. So, didn't finish that pizza.
That's the future
Taoiseach. I do know that, by the way.
Future Taoiseach of Ireland. Table of 4, dinner table guests. Who are they?
Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
Would be great. I was thinking Winston Churchill.
Okay. All making sense so far.
Yeah, I can tell you. Tell you why in a bit more detail. Saint Bridget. That'd be an interesting one.
That's out of left field. Didn't expect that.
Who else would I have?
I've only got one more. President Trump.
Maybe Liz Truss.
Okay.
Never actually met her.
So there's the 4. How's that conversation going to go? And why? Why?
Yeah. Okay. So Freddie Mercury is somebody I'd be very interested in.
Yeah.
He has an Indian background too. Real name Farooq Balsara, but not something he ever spoke much about. And then also a gay man. Died of AIDS, And again, never got to see Queen live. Would have loved to have.
At home at the dinner party.
Yeah, and I think they've been interesting conversations we had there. I wonder what he was like in person. Seems kind of a troubled person, but a brilliant,
a genius.
Yeah, a genius too. So I think he'd be interesting. Churchill, somebody who obviously is a hero of the Second World War in terms of identifying fascism and standing up to it very quickly when others tried to appease it. But a more complicated figure as well. Somebody who was an imperialist, somebody who didn't have a very positive attitude towards Ireland. So I'd like to explore that with him. Get his thoughts on the treaty, which he was involved in negotiating. And then also that fascinating offer he made to De Valera that we could have a united Ireland if Ireland joined the war effort. And I wondered, was that ever for real? Was it a serious offer? And then secondly, what might have happened?
What's your gut on was it real?
I don't know. You see, that's why it'd be really interesting. And of course, even if it had been real, it would have been done against the will of the majority of people at the time in Northern Ireland, which meant we might have had a whole different sort of troubles. They might have played out on the streets of Dublin, Cork, and Limerick. So that would be interesting to talk to him about. St. Bridget's slightly because one of the things I had the privilege of doing in politics was making St. Bridget's Day a public holiday.
Yeah.
But as you know, she's
great day.
She's an interesting figure because she, probably started off life as a Celtic goddess and sort of evolved into a Christian saint. So she was both a real person, but also somebody whose story is borrowed from Celtic mythology. So kind of interesting to figure out what you'd have to say about that.
And Liz Truss?
Yeah, that's a very random one. I worked with 4 British prime ministers. One of them was not Liz Truss because we didn't overlap during her 45 days in office. Apparently she's good fun.
Okay.
Or so I'm told, that she's actually very good company.
She does things a little off the cuff.
Yes, and so you want a dinner party to be interesting. You don't want to be,
There's going to be some serious chat in there as it is.
So that would be kind of...
That's a real insight into you, yeah. That's why I love that question, because it kind of picks on all parts of your life and your ideology. On the Winston thing, without wanting to go into a deep dive on it, was there any moment in your career in politics where you felt it was that sort of Winston Churchill offer moment where you were like, oh, the decision that's made here could change the course of history or the course of where Ireland is going? Did you ever get that sort of moment as Taoiseach?
There's certainly, there can be moments like that. Never at the level of World War, obviously. Not thankfully not the kind of decisions I've had to be involved in. Well, certainly there were particularly tough points around the negotiations around Brexit, where we had to map out different scenarios, and we held the line all the way through that there wouldn't be any form of a hard border between North and South, that there wouldn't be any forms of checks or border infrastructure. And there were points at which you had to consider, and certainly others would have put me under a certain degree of pressure to make a compromise, for fear that if you don't make this compromise now, the end outcome is going to be the main thing you try to avoid. And we held the line on that. Simon Covey and I don't regret doing that, but it was potentially a gamble because sometimes you do have to compromise because getting 50% of what you want is better than getting nothing.
Yep.
But we didn't on that.
Last question, I usually go with a food one, but it's just in your experience and having you here as a guest, I want to go with something a little more broad. Ireland in 20 years' time, based on your experience, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, look, I'm an optimist. Yeah. The arc of history bends towards progress, even if it's not always a straight line. Ireland's a better place than it was 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 60 years ago by any objective analysis. But we'll never be a perfect place. There's always going to be problems and challenges. I think it'll be a country with a lot more people than we have now. Probably in around 6 million, both through a combination of natural growth and through migration. I do think by then we'll have got on top of our infrastructure problems. whether it's housing or public transport. Ireland just grew so fast that we've outstripped our own infrastructure, and I think we'll get on top of that. I don't know if we'll have unification by then between North and South, but I hope that happens, and I believe it can happen in my lifetime.
You still be eating good food?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm hoping to do now is eat better. So, I now actually largely get to decide what I eat every day. So, trying to eat clean during the week and then not worry about the weekend.
Plenty of ice cream at the weekend.
Yeah, ice cream's good though.
Thank you very much, Leo Varadkar. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. If you like what you heard, you can like and subscribe. You can leave a review, or even if you just tell a friend about this podcast, even better. You can also watch this full conversation and Leo eating his coconut ice cream on YouTube. And we'll see you next time.
Love your ice cream. Thank you.
Thank you to Barry's Tea for supporting this podcast. Barry's Tea holds a special place in people's hearts. Not just because it tastes amazing, but because as Irish people, Barry's Tea is one of those special things that connects us with home and that sense of belonging. We drink it in cafes, in restaurants, at book clubs, when we're out hiking. We even bring it on holidays and drink it all over the world. No matter where you are or what you're doing, one sip of Barry's Tea and you're home.